Welcome to PowerUp podcast, the podcast that seeks to empower and dismantle, giving us the power and confidence to question, deconstruct, rebuild, and expand in life. I'm your host, AmaRouge, voiceover and multidisciplinary artist, well-being advocate, food and book geek with over 14 years of movement-centered experience.
I am your host, Mesma, artist, choreographer, yogi and coach with a passion for alchemy, creativity, transformation and workplace wellness.
We recognise that we can't dismantle and empower or be empowered without first learning ourselves, diving deeper to unlearn the harmful, restrictive and unprogressive. It's an ongoing practice and journey for us all, which is why we created this podcast.
Our show features guests doing the work to enlighten, deconstruct and power up in their own magical ways.
We're going to be having conversations around the power of healing, transformation, well-being and creativity, and how they feed our personal and collective evolution, how they help us power up.
We are back. We are live with the incredible Robyn Dalzen, who joined us for Navigating Balance and is back for Undoing and Resistance. It's a pleasure to have you here, Robyn.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be back with both of you.
The gang is back together. I love it.
Yeah.
And why is Robyn back? Well, we have been thinking a lot about how integrated or how intertwined privilege and dominant culture are with choice, and how important that unlearning is, and to recognize how those things might impact our learning and how we perceive the world. And so who better to talk about this with than the amazing Robyn Dalzen?
Thank you so much. So good to be here. And this is such an important topic. And recently, someone said, consent is a privilege. And I have really been thinking about that statement. Consent is a privilege. And it's one that is easy to dismiss. And yet I think there's so much truth in that. And when we talk about consent being about choice, there are oftentimes and experiences where we are not at choice. And therefore, we cannot create consent or an agreement with another. And there are a lot of things that impact our ability to be at choice. And so I've been thinking about consent and how we often approach consent. And we think of consent as being this binary of yes or no. You know, I either want it or I don't want it, or I'm willing to be engaged with someone or I'm not willing to engage with someone. And it's this black or white. And then we question, you know, if you didn't want it, why didn't you speak up? And there's so much more at play when we're talking about consent. And there's this whole area where I might be a maybe, or I might not know what I want or what I don't want. And some of the factors that impact that, it might be that I need more time to get clear about whether I want it or I don't want it. It might be that I need more information.
Yeah.
It might be that whatever's happening is something I'm unfamiliar with. Or it might be a trauma response that I'm experiencing. So there's this whole realm of I don't know and maybe that needs to be unpacked before coming to a clear yes or no.
Yeah.
And then there's this whole other area of I don't have a choice. And that can be based on a power imbalance. That can be an issue of cultural exclusion. It can be, I am not given an option. That can be economic disempowerment. And it can be based on systemic trauma. And so this whole area of not having a choice has major impacts on our ability as a culture, as a society, to create consensual agreements and consensual systems.
And that makes me feel really emotional, actually, because if we think about our society and how much is based on taking, and how the layers and the level of undoing that needs to happen to really live in a society which is empowered by choice, when, if we look at the fact that the UK and America are hugely built on slavery and on a system of oppression.
Yeah, our systems are not designed to be equitable.
Precisely.
And when we realize that, it can be really difficult to face that reality, that knowing, that understanding. And we're seeing the resistance to that coming up all around us. We're seeing those who feel threatened with people speaking up and speaking out about those inequities.
Yeah.
And we're seeing people fighting tooth and nail to hold on to those systems.
Yes. And that's where that question, what are they protecting, is so important, because very often the people who don't want others to speak out, it's because they are very comfortable with their privilege, and it's triggering them to have to face it and confront their own comfort at being above other people, and allowing oppression or turning a blind eye to
Mm-hmm.
oppression.
Yeah, and I imagine there
Mm.
are those with privilege who want to hold on to these systems. And I imagine there are also those who are marginalized who are also holding on to those systems because it's what is known. And even
Mm.
though it doesn't make it right, there's
Mm.
a comfort and a safety in what is known.
Yes.
And there's incredible
Yeah.
discomfort in stepping into the unknown.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of this work.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And what we're all about, empowering up, and learning to lean into the discomfort and lean into the unknown
Yeah.
and leaning into the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And being, I don't know if courageous is actually the right word, but being courageous in yourself to go, okay, actually being honest. I think it's being honest within yourself to go, this is what I'm scared of losing. This is what I'm scared of stepping into the unknown. This is what I've always known and it feels familiar and comfortable. And this is why I want to hold on to it, even if I know it's not right, even if I'm coming into that awareness, but I'm willing to be honest
Mm.
enough with myself, firstly there, and then to step beyond that. And I think that is a big part of the discussion.
Yeah. And you saying that made me think about homeostasis in terms of this, that very often we're in survival mode, or when we're not empowered to make a choice, we're still in that kind of, this is the lot I have in life, and this is how it is. And how that journey to actually lean in, and I've forgotten the word that you chose, um, being courageous, like the work that has to happen to get to that place of courage.
Mm,
Because first of all, we need to kind of understand that nothing will happen, or perhaps nothing will happen, if we change our pattern.
yes,
Yeah, it's a huge and complex.
that is definitely step one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I feel this reminds me of that particular belief where you feel like you're going to die. You're going to die if X, Y, and Z. And it's like this feeling of, oh my gosh, it's so unsafe on that side. I don't even want to go there because my whole
Mm-hmm.
world is going to fall apart and I'm not ready for that.
Well, and I like what you said, about, am I willing to step into this? Am I willing to step into the discomfort? And we talked in the previous episode about the differences between what we want and what we're willing to do. And so it might not be that, yeah, I want this discomfort. I want to step into this place. We may not want that. It is uncomfortable. But are we willing? Are we willing to step into this place that makes us uncomfortable because we see that there's an opportunity and a possibility for things to be different? And that for me is where the power and the potency is. Like, what does it take for us to access our willingness to be in this place of discomfort, knowing that something better can come of it? And I think it's so important for us to be willing to step into this place of discomfort and to welcome the disruptions that arise as a way for us to learn and as a way for us to grow and expand beyond our current capacity. And ultimately, I think this is the only way we're going to dismantle these systems that have taken us out of a place of choice and consent. And there are a lot of people who are really comfortable. Um, I can relate to that. I've been in this place of
Yeah.
feeling, in a place of a lot of privilege and comfort, and I want something different in the world.
Mm. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think to an extent, maybe all of us first, we need to get to a place of comfort within ourselves and within the world. Maybe not, maybe there's incredible humans who haven't needed that. But for me, I needed to find that state of homeostasis to feel okay, to be able to then do the work. And perhaps I wouldn't have been as able to do the work or as helpful in the work
Yeah.
had I not got to that place of being okay within myself first.
Hmm. Yeah, and what that brings up for me is, it's similar to how I teach this work around consent. So I don't take someone into an unfamiliar experience and throw them in the deep end. And, it might, a simple example would be, giving them an exercise to experiment and try on speaking up for what they want or saying no. And, I'm not throwing them into an experience for an hour. It's a few minutes to step in, to try it out, and then pause and reflect on what they noticed. Maybe, come out and then go back in again. And I imagine it's the
Mm,
same process, that we can't fully throw ourselves into these processes of trying to dismantle these systems that have been around for hundreds of years and expect that we have the capacity to hold that intensity. And so
mm,
knowing what our own capacity is, and that's going to be different for each of us. How much intensity can we step into, and when do we need to step back and rest so that we can step in again? And so I feel like it's this titrated process, of knowing ourselves and our own capacity, so that we can stick with this, for as long as it takes, which is, I imagine, going to be beyond our lifetime.
mhm. It would be nice to see some of it in this lifetime.
It would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Well said, Robyn. I feel like you articulated it all so well.
What does it bring up for you?
I'm just thinking about this idea of capacity and being able to be in tune enough with themselves to know when it's time to step out and when they're able to step back in, making sure that they're taking the responsibility and choice to recharge and pause, but not shy away from, and then come back in as they know how. And I think for a lot of people, that's scary. They want a roadmap. They want some kind of blueprint. They want some way to know how to do it. And there isn't one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's different for everyone. And I think it's one of those things where you just have to begin. And once you begin, you'll get to a point where you'll be able to go, right, I don't know where to go now, but I'll pause here and I'll see how to go further forward. And then you go further forward, and then you'll see how to go further and further and further.
I was thinking about that, the importance of getting uncomfortable and being comfortable with being uncomfortable, and that creative tension, or that psychological tension of, as you said so well, Amma, like not knowing and having to be okay with that. And how when we are able to be with that discomfort, then actually there's the potential there for the change and the dismantling and even the unlearning of ourselves and our own beliefs.
Absolutely.
What Robyn said about that, almost like that ebb and flow of recognizing when we're kind of, our energy's out and we're able to be out there and to dismantle and to perhaps shout about it, and when we need to come back and recharge. And then, like you said, also understanding when is it your time to go, well, actually I need to recharge, but this is important and I have to speak out of it, and I have to recognize that the privilege that I might have to be able to come back out, that that this is a work that people are in every single day, and some people are in that fight every single day. So what's our part and what's our responsibility, and where are we getting comfortable with recharging? So when is it time to come back out again and fight the fight?
Yeah.
One, even noticing, for some, myself included in that, I have a choice about when do I step um, into these issues, and I can step out, and that's a choice for me. And for many,
Mm,
it's not a choice. They are in it every single day, and there's no pause button.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's
yeah.
also building an awareness of where are those places for rest for all of us, and how do we support those individuals who
Yeah.
don't have the choice to take a pause and step out. um,
Mm,
and so I feel like that's part of my
Yeah.
responsibility in supporting the co-regulation of community. Where are the places
mm,
where I have more privilege around that,
Mm-hmm.
and I can support others, um, in having those opportunities for rest.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that coming back to, that's why consent is a privilege, and also why this work is so important in unlearning and in resistance.
So the question that comes up for me is, how do we shift? How do we shift this paradigm and this system to a point where consent is not a privilege, but consent is a right of every individual?
Big
Big
question.
question. Listeners, do you have the answers? I I suppose one of my thoughts is where we use our voice to keep on campaigning, to keep on speaking out, to keep on saying no to the very evident things that happen, every day, but that we think we see in the news, like the recent news, where is consent clearly not a choice? And then how layered are those stories that we're seeing every day? So where do we speak out, and where do we continue to fight?
How do we continue educating ourselves, and how do we build communities of support
Mm,
so that
Mm.
we aren't lone voices speaking
Yeah,
up?
very important, especially when a lot of the landscape of this work is exhausting. It's consuming, it's tiring. So that community, it becomes even more important, even more necessary, even more valuable.
mm. I'm also wondering about having a voice and feeling empowered to have a voice, and the kind of the layers around, like if we go back to that conversation around the dominant culture and the kind of the unlearning of even having the confidence to speak up or to question, and where the work is there to continue to empower people to speak up and to speak out and to make mistakes. That I think very often people are scared to say something because they're scared they're going to get it wrong. So how do we also have compassion for that and allow for those mistakes to happen and that shared learning to continue?
It reminds me of a story that was just in the news about this attorney who got on a Zoom call to make a case, and he was on a borrowed laptop of a colleague's. Their child had it set up, so he showed up as a cat. The cat, I don't know if you saw this. And so, he's trying to figure out how to fix it, and he can't figure out how to fix it, and then he just says, I'm willing to proceed. And they're like, it's hilarious, and there's a level of humility
Yeah.
and a willingness to go ahead even when things aren't working. And I mean, it's like this, yeah, and you're an attorney and you're making a case and you look like a cat, like it's ridiculous. And yet,
Yeah.
his willingness to just go and, go ahead and say, I can do this. And, how many times do we get discouraged? Do we hit this point of, I can't figure it out, I can't
Mm.
fix it, I don't know the right way forward, and
Yeah.
yet we say, but I'm willing to proceed. I'm willing to show up in this place of
Yeah.
discomfort and just get on with it. Even if it's not perfect, even if I look ridiculous, I'm willing to proceed.
Yeah. As you said earlier, Robyn, looking ahead and going, what may be on the other side of this, may well be brilliant. I may actually expand into a person that I was even unaware of becoming. It could bring so much good. I recognize that it's really important to acknowledge any resistance that may be showing up. So actually, listeners, I can speak directly to you now. If you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, yes, that lands with me, or identify with that, what resistance is showing up for you? And if there is any resistance that's showing up for you, can you acknowledge that and still choose and be willing to continue to go forward, irrespective, rather than holding on to that resistance and allowing it to block you or leaning on it as a crutch? Can you simply acknowledge the sensation of resistance, but still be willing to step forward?
I love that, and it makes me think of, bringing this back to the body, and how much can we allow ourselves to feel the resistance without trying to fix it or change it or make it go away, but even like expand into it, to fully step into it, to speak to it, to give it voice, because it feels that it's only in that, stepping in and allowing,
Yeah,
that we can actually give it the space that it needs to dissipate.
just let that land with you for a moment. Lots to think about here. We've talked about a lot, lots to go away and reflect and meditate on. Check in with yourself. Ask yourself what action you're going to be taking off the back of this discussion today. I know we are. We love you guys. Thank you for taking the time to hang out with us, for choosing to have this conversation with us. We will see you next week for the very last episode in the season. Can you believe we're almost at the end of season 1? Like, when did that happen? If you've missed any previous episodes or you know you've got episodes you want to catch up on, you're going to have some time to do that, as we'll be taking an end of season pause. So use that time wisely. We are so excited to bring you the final episode of this season next week. It's a banger. Look out for it. It got really real and we can't wait for you to be in the conversation. We'll see you then. We love you. Have a wicked week.
Thank you for listening. You can connect to us and our guests via the links in each episode's show notes. Before you go, we invite you to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the goodness to come. And if you enjoyed today, perhaps tell a friend to tell a friend. We are always grateful for you, our listeners, for our fabulous guests, and to everyone who has contributed to and been a part of our journey here.
Our music is by Tomo Carter. Everything else is brought to you by us, the PowerUp Power Team.
I'm Mesma.
I am AmaRouge.
And we are PowerUp Podcast.